Welcome to the Thameside ERF project site induction. The induction itself is going to take about half an hour of your time, and then at the end there's a quick test just to demonstrate your understanding. So whether you're on site today as a visitor or carrying out work on site, your safety is our prime objective at all times. If you have any health, safety or environmental concerns whilst you're on the site, please raise them with your supervisor and Viridor site representative. This induction provides you with instructions and guidance to avoid potential hazards and keep you safe. We want you to go home safe every single day. And to support that, there are three core expectations that Viridor has. Assess all risks, follow the rules, and take ownership. And these are the three building blocks of our health and safety arrangements. It's about making sure you've assessed the risk before you carry out the work. It's about following the approved RAMs and following the site rules. And if you see something, take ownership of it, report it through to your supervisor, prevent anyone being harmed from the hazard or the risk that you find. So the Thameside ERF site is located within the boundary of the Port of Tilbury. So when you're in the port, you'll need to comply with all the port rules and regulations. To gain access to a site, so if you look at the diagram on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a green line. So the green line starts at the main entrance of the site. Just follow that down to the first roundabout, which is about 30 yards down. Take a right at that roundabout and follow the road all the way around until you see the sign for Tilbury Green Power. That entrance there is the main entrance to our construction site. Now, the site itself has been cleared in preparation for the demolition of the remaining structures on the site, and therefore this induction deals with all the hazards and risks that are still in place. The site itself is open between 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock, Monday to Friday. So upon arrival each day at site, please be mindful that you're crossing a railway line. If the red lights are flashing, please stop. If they're not, then please access the site going no faster than 10 miles per hour. The parking area is located behind the gatehouse. Once you've exited your car, if you wouldn't mind going in and signing in at the gatehouse with a security guard. And again, when you're leaving site at night, if you can sign yourself out so that we know where you are at all times. So when you arrive at our site, we'd like you to follow the site rules. It's one of our core expectations. And so it means that, you don't drive any faster than 10 miles per hour. If you're parking up, please reverse park. And if you need to muster, then the muster point is located in the hard standing in the car park. There's only one set of handrails on site, and that's in the gatehouse. So please hold the handrail if you're accessing or egressing. And the minimum PPE requirements are safety helmet, eye protection, high-vis clothing, protective gloves, and protective footwear. Before you carry out any task, there needs to be an approved RAMs in place, and we'll explain that process later in the induction. And any work needs to be carried out by competent and authorised persons. If you see anything different when you arrive at site in terms of hazard and risk that's not in your RAMs, take that 5 minutes to stop, reassess, have a chat with your supervisor. Just make sure you take that little bit of time to keep yourself safe before you commence the work. One of the key things that you can do on site is to keep the housekeeping good. It's one of the main sources of incidents and accidents on sites in terms of slips, trips and falls. So take pride in the work environment and tidy as you go. And if you see anything that's unsafe, challenge it. Report all unsafe acts and conditions, because we'll do something about it. We'll stop the work, we'll reassess, we'll make things safe, we'll take the appropriate action that's necessary. So please, if you do see something, please report it and let's take ownership of it and get it resolved. So with that in mind, if you need to report all incidents to your supervisor and to the Viridor site representative immediately. Smoking is only permitted in designated smoking area adjacent to your welfare. All media requests should be made through your Viridor site representative. Mobile phones can only be used in the welfare area or in the safe location in the parking that we've talked about in the hard standing. So don't remove any waste from site without approval. We don't want waste being taken off the site that doesn't have a designated route, a licensed waste route. And again, if there is going to be some loan working, that needs to be reflected within your RAMs that have to be approved. And the minimum we would expect is that you would report into the gatehouse prior to your loan working activity and report back to the gatehouse upon completion. So again, all loan working needs to be prior approved and needs to be reflected within your RAMs. So what does this all boil down to? It's as simple as we want you to go home safe at the end of each day. Our focus is on prevention. We want to prevent all injuries and accidents. Our primary concern is your health and well-being. And that's why we want you to report any observations on unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. Doesn't matter how trivial you think you are, it's important and we'll investigate them. We want to have a minimal impact upon our environment and have no security breaches on our site. We want to be a good neighbour and minimise the disturbance to the public and to our neighbours. The main Port of Tilbury welfare facilities are located at the Lock and Key restaurant. So when you get to the main entrance, rather than turning right at the roundabout to go up to the ERF site, if you turn left and follow that round, you'll find the Lock and Key restaurant adjacent to the Leslie Ford House. And at the Lock and Key, you'll find the canteen facilities and the public toilets that are available to everyone on the Port of Tilbury. So in the event of a site emergency, the site muster point is in the site car park. A muster roll call will be taken by the Viridor site representative and communicated to the gatehouse. Now, the gatehouse is controlled by TGP, and in addition to TGP, we need to inform the Port of Tilbury Police on 01375 846 781. You'll be asked to remain at the muster point until advised otherwise. The first aid arrangements located at the first aid room at the Occupational Health Building at the Port of Tilbury. And there is a local hospital at Basildon, which is about a 15 to 20-minute drive from the port, basically back onto the A13 heading towards Southend. And then you take the first turning for the A176 and it's signposted from there for the A&E hospital. Just a reminder to everyone that there are no drugs or alcohol allowed on the site, and there are random tests that are undertaken on a periodic basis. So at the site, before you carry out any activity, you will need an approved RAMS and work authorisation. All work authorisation requests need to be made to your Viridor site representative, who will then liaise with the Port of Tilbury and TGP to get their approval. Once you have an approved set of RAMs and work authorisation, please do not deviate from that approved RAMs. If you discover any changes to hazard or risk, please stop and reassess. Now, when I'm going to talk about specific site hazards, the site is getting ready for demolition, and therefore we've got uneven surfaces. We've got trip hazards out there. There are certain parts of the site that are not particularly well lit. We want you to comply with the traffic arrangements in place. So it's the 10 miles an hour speed limit, but it's also making sure you're keeping 2 metres clear of the railway line. If you're bringing tools to site, make sure they're in good condition and you've got the relevant certificates with them. The power tools, the only power tools permitted on site are operated by air or battery 110 volts. We're not expected to see 240 on the site. And again, we're expecting to see pat testing where that's relevant. and records of pat testing. So similarly, if you're bringing chemicals and hazardous substances onto the site, make sure you've got the material safety data sheets and you've got your cost assessments with you and appropriate storage containers for those. It will certainly be checking on that. One of the main hazards on site that could result in serious injury or death is the railway crossing adjacent to the site. Do not cross the railway line if the red lights are flashing. This is monitored by the Port of Tilbury Police, and potential outcomes are penalty points, a fine, and up to 2 years imprisonment for those that do not comply with the regulations. So adjacent to the gatehouse is an access road that leads up to a high voltage switchyard. All access permission is controlled through Tilbury Green Power. Please do not park in this area. Any laydown or storage requirements need to be agreed with the Viridor site representative first. And you also need to be mindful of the fact that TGP delivery vehicles sometimes park in this area at peak times. So just be aware, when this happens, particularly if you're walking around this particular area of site at those peak times. One of the things we want to draw your attention to is the fact that we're adjacent to the Botany Channel. We certainly encounter rats on the site. There's a number of disused buildings, and again that increases the risk of rats' urine and coming into contact with rats' urine. So in terms of preventing leptospirosis, is why we encourage you to wear your gloves all the time. Prevent the cuts, prevent the grazes. And if you come to site and you've got cuts and grazes, one of the things you can do is make sure your hands are clean. Make sure that the cuts and grazes are covered. You've got waterproof plasters on them before you go out to work. And just check them when you come back as well. There's some basic things that you can do. This is a very nasty disease. It can start like a flu, and then it can lead to vomiting, muscle pains, and ultimately to jaundice, meningitis, and kidney failure. So before you move on to the next slide, just click the little video here and spend a few minutes with Ricky Tomlinson, who's going to take you through a story that's very pertinent to leptospirosis.
Health and safety plays a bigger and bigger part in our everyday lives now, and that's a good thing. It's widely used in industry, whether it's in the building industry, the engineering industry, people going away to see it, doesn't matter. In my case, I was a building worker, so we were used to hard hats. We didn't want any bricks to fall on us. We wore goggles because we didn't want anything in our eyes. We wore all sorts of things, and at times we even wore gloves, but no one paid particular attention to gloves. Maybe the lads would use it when they were offloading bricks or concrete blocks, and also to stop cuts and grazes, but it's also to prevent yourself from getting contaminated. Now that might sound corny, contamination on a building site. Never heard of it before. I hadn't until I met Robin here, and he's going to tell you what happened to him when he never wore his gloves one day. And I must remind you, this is a true story.
I was working in Poland on a wastewater treatment. What we would do is we would take all of the brown water from the city and we would filter it, clean it, recycle it, take the solids away, dry the solids, and then we would burn the solids. Being a wastewater treatment plant, being a construction site, we had rats. I mean, we had big rats. And I was walking around over a period of probably 2 to 3 months around these various sites, going backwards and forwards. And of course we used to walk around, no gloves on. We'd walk around. I'd go up and down the steel work, I'd go over the block work, over the site, and you'd be holding on. You do. you'd be holding on, you'd have your hands on the handrail. And I absorbed the rat's urine through my hand. I got a high temperature. I was freezing cold. I was constantly being sick. Couldn't keep anything inside me. I kept vomiting. I kept sweating. I had diarrhea. I knew there was something wrong. Can't drink and keep anything down. I couldn't take anything solid. My right kidney shut down. So then my left kidney went out. So then your blood's getting thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker.
Yeah.
I'm then on a heart machine, having to have an operation because the food I had managed to keep inside me, I hadn't digested.
Oh, no.
Because your throat or your food passage into your stomach is part of your nervous system. You know, it's a reflex, but your brain tells it to do it. And my brain had decided I ain't going to tell her to do that. So all that was happening was I was swallowing the food. I was getting the food into my throat, and all it was doing was backing up and backing up and backing up. So I then got an operation across here where they took away a piece of my food pipe, and then they took away a piece of my stomach because that had been affected by the nervous shutdown. I went from incredibly fit to close to death in a matter of 2 months, all basically because there was no health and safety requirement for us to wear gloves. And I went into hospital in the September. I came out at the end of November, but I didn't get back to work until the March of the following year. I couldn't work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now you've opened my eyes, and I've been more or less in the building game since I've been 15, and I've never heard of a story like. I would never have thought rat pee could cause that much damage.
Yeah.
It's a hidden danger, see, isn't it?
And that's the problem. That is the problem. It's a hidden danger. It's not like smoking a cigarette. You know, you smoke a cigarette.
You can see it, yeah.
You can
the
see
smoke.
it. Hang on, I'm having a puff.
Or if you see someone smoking, you can get out the way.
You can get it. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a hidden danger that's there, that can explode at any damn time, and if it does explode and it gets to you, you could be fatalities.
Well, there you go. I mean, you can't. That's, as we say, from the horse's mouth. So you know the game now. Hats on, goggles on, gloves on. Don't take any chances.
So, in terms of the old gatehouse, we've got it's located on the access road to the high voltage switchyard that we talked about. There are sort of toilets and welfare areas in the building, so please don't use them. It's all been disconnected. You know, please don't enter the building. unless you've got specific work activities getting carried out in that area and that have been risk assessed. There's a number of slip, trips and fall risks in the area. So again, it's a reminder all the utilities have been disconnected from the building, and the lighting's poor within the area. So be mindful of that if you're working around it or you have approval to work inside it. So one of the remaining buildings on site is the Bat House. And if you need access into this area, you need to get that through your Viridor site representative. No bats have occupied the building, and therefore there are no specific bat hazards that are relevant. However, there are slips, trips, and fall risks in the area. And again, one thing we'd request is it's not a smoking shelter. Please don't smoke within this area. So, as mentioned earlier on, one of the things we're very keen on is being a good neighbour. And one of our neighbours is the TGP site. We don't have any boundary between us and the TGP site, so there's no fencing up there. But you're not allowed to go into that area, you're not allowed to go into the TGB plant area without approval. If you need to get approval, that has to be arranged through your Viridor site representative. So just be mindful, folks. It is about remaining a good neighbour whilst we're carrying out our work activities. For those of you who need access into the Botany Channel and Culvert area, this is controlled through an access gate under lock and key. So to gain permission, you'll need to go through your Viridor site representative who will coordinate your access arrangements. Once you're through onto the other side, then there are cleared access routes that have been established, but there's still trip and slip hazards in the area. And if you're operating within 1 metre of the channel, you'll need to wear a suitable life jacket and know how to use it. So part of the approved RAMs for your activities will also include emergency rescue arrangements. Well, we're getting towards the end of the induction now. And before you answer the questions, just a couple of things just to remind you about. There are some damaged services around the site, so damaged cover plates. You might find some concrete debris around. You might find some sharps and broken needles. So it's about keeping your eyes, your ears open, watching where you're walking. Also, there's just a final reminder about poisoned hemlock that you might find if you're on the other side in terms of the Botany Channel. Yes, it's poisonous if it's ingested. You're more likely to come in contact with it and rubbing off your skin. So if you've got sensitive skin, that can cause dermatitis. So it's a reminder that the PPE is there to protect you. It's to protect you from dermatitis. It's to protect you from rat's urine. It's to protect you from cuts and scratches. So, we want you to go home safe at the end of the day, folks. And that's why, remember to stick to the site rules and have a safe visit to our site.